The stagecoach groaned as its wooden wheels lurched over another rut in the endless, sun-baked road. The woman pressed her gloved hands tighter around the little carpetbag in her lap, as though holding it close could still the storm inside her chest. Every jolt of the carriage seemed to shake loose another thread of doubt. She leaned toward the window, gazing at the vast, barren plain stretching forever, a land so unlike the crowded streets of the town she had left behind. Out here, there were no familiar faces, no neighbors whispering behind closed doors, no reminders of the shame that had followed her like a shadow. Out here, only sky and dust waited, and a man she had never met. Her fingers brushed over the folded letter tucked safely inside the bag. She had read it so many times she could recite every word, though the ink was already smudged from tears she hadn't meant to cry. He had written plainly, without flourishes, promising her nothing more than honesty, a roof, and a chance at belonging. There had been no talk of love, no poetry, only the blunt hand of a rancher who needed someone by his side. She had clung to that bluntness, mistaking it for safety, yet now her heart quivered. She whispered a prayer under her breath, her voice trembling, almost childlike in its desperation. She was still untouched, still innocent of the closeness marriage demanded, and the thought of giving herself to a stranger left her stomach knotted. What if he was cruel? What if she was not enough? What if this dusty plain was only another kind of prison? The leather strap of her bonnet bit into her chin as she tried to steady her breathing, but no calm would come. The driver cracked his whip, and the horses surged forward, carrying her farther from the world she once knew and deeper into the unknown. For a fleeting second, she considered leaping from the coach, running until her lungs burned, but where would she go? She had sold everything to make this journey. She had no family to turn to, no safe harbor waiting back east. Her only choice was forward. She closed her eyes, clutched the letter one more time, and whispered to herself the single fragile hope she dared to keep alive, that perhaps, in this wide and lonely land, she might find a place where her heart could finally rest. The coach came to a grinding halt, its wheels sending up a cloud of dust that clung to her dress and veil as she stepped carefully onto the packed earth. Heat shimmered from the ground, and the dry wind tugged at her skirts. For a moment she stood frozen, clutching her carpetbag with both hands as though it were a shield. Then her gaze lifted, and she saw him. The rancher was taller than she had pictured, broad-shouldered and straight-backed, the kind of man who looked carved from the very land he worked. His hat shaded his eyes, but she caught glimpses of their depth, dark, cautious, watchful. A neatly trimmed beard covered the sharp lines of his jaw, and his shirt sleeves were rolled, exposing arms tanned and hardened by years of labor. He looked nothing like the boyish figure she had sometimes imagined when rereading his letters. This was a man weathered by loss, toil, and time. Her throat went dry. She wanted to speak, to at least say his name, but the words lodged in her chest. He took a step forward, his boots heavy on the dust, and held out his hand. The gesture was plain, almost formal, but she saw the roughness of his skin, the small nicks and calluses that spoke of his life. Slowly, with hesitation trembling through her, she slipped her gloved hand into his. His grip was firm, steady, yet not crushing. For an instant, she felt anchored, though the silence between them pressed harder than any weight. The rancher's lips parted, as though to speak, but no words came. She lowered her gaze, her lashes brushing her cheek, and wondered if he too felt the awkwardness of two strangers bound by paper promises. The stillness stretched, heavy with uncertainty, until suddenly the sharp, bright sound of little footsteps broke across the yard. A child's voice rang out, high and eager. "Papa!" She turned just as a small girl with dark braids flew from the porch, her laughter scattering the tension like a sudden gust of wind. The rancher's face softened instantly, his hand slipping from hers as he bent to scoop the child into his arms. The transformation startled her, the stern man before her melted into something tender, protective, achingly human. The little girl nestled against him, her eyes shining with curiosity as they flicked toward the newcomer standing stiffly at the edge of the yard. The bride-to-be's heart thudded. This was the moment she had feared most, to be seen not only by him but by the innocent eyes of a child. She stood rooted, uncertain if she belonged on this soil, in this life, or in their world at all. The little girl wriggled down from her father's arms before he could stop her. Bare feet pattered across the dusty ground as she ran straight toward the stranger in the simple traveling dress. Wide brown eyes, curious and bright as the morning sun, fixed on her face with a boldness that made the young woman's breath catch. Children, she thought, carried no hesitation, no caution, they simply spoke their truth. The girl stopped just a step away, tilting her head as if studying every detail, the nervous hands clutching the carpetbag, the way her bonnet had slipped askew in the wind, the tremble she could not quite hide in her lips. Then, in the clearest, most earnest voice, the child asked, "Are you gonna be my mama?" The words struck like an arrow, so simple and yet piercing deeper than anything the rancher's letter had stirred. The young woman's heart lurched. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The question was too big, too fragile. She glanced at the rancher instinctively, searching for rescue, but he was already stepping forward, his jaw tight, his voice low as he murmured his daughter's name in gentle reprimand. "Now, that's not a proper thing to ask," he said, his tone carrying the awkwardness of a man unused to softness. Yet his eyes betrayed something else, an ache, a longing he could not hide. The girl only blinked up at him, then turned back to the stranger with expectant eyes, unbothered by his scolding. Her innocence held no understanding of promises or burdens, only the ache of a child who missed something she could not name. The young woman's chest tightened, and she felt her carefully built wall of fear begin to crack. Her hand shook as she lowered her bag, crouching just enough to meet the child's gaze. She wanted to answer, to give comfort, but her tongue faltered. I don't know," she whispered, her voice breaking with honesty. The girl studied her for a moment longer, then smiled. A small, shy curve of lips that revealed a gap where her front tooth had been lost. With the innocent certainty only a child could possess, she slipped her small hand into the woman's gloved one and held it as though it had always belonged there. The bride-to-be felt her throat burn, her eyes sting. That tiny hand, so warm and trusting, undid her terror in ways the rancher's steady handshake never could. She dared to squeeze back, and though she still quaked with uncertainty, something new flickered inside her chest, something dangerously close to hope.